This is my Panasonic HC-X2000 camcorder. I got it last year. It's a relatively new model. They introduced it 2 or 3 years ago, so it makes a change for someone like me to use something quite new. But they've introduced a firmware update, and the main reason I'm interested in that firmware update is because they've changed the way the focusing works. Like most cameras of this nature, it has face tracking autofocus, and it has manual focus as well, but the manual focus works a bit funny. It's got an electronic control ring which doesn't really behave as you'd expect. The camera I'm recording this video on is a broadcast TV camera, and if I just put that knob back, you can see in the background we've got another camera which I'm using as a prop, and I can just turn the lens on here and change the focus to where I want it. And because this is fully mechanical, it's very easy to just turn it to exactly where you want it. You see, they were focused on the Canon SLR camera, which is just poking its head above the X2000. If I turn it a bit further, we're on the XH-A1. And that's really useful to do when you're recording video, because you can change the focus between different subjects like that to emphasise something, but you have to know how far to turn the knob and when to stop turning it, and it doesn't really work very well on the Panasonic. Now this is the screen of the Panasonic, and I'll just put it in record mode so that we can actually see what it's recording, and you'll see that the Canon EOS 30 camera is in focus. And if I just want to change the focus to the XH-A1, it's actually a bit difficult to lock that on exactly compared to the broadcast camera, which is a mechanical lens. It's actually quite... I can change the focus between the two, but if you go a little bit too quick, it overshoots. If you go too slowly just to back it off, it goes really, really slow. It doesn't actually correspond to the speed at which I'm changing the knob. So if I just turn it really, really slowly, you can see on the screen that the distance is changing. It is changing, but I have to keep going and 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 keep going until it gets to where I want it. So really it doesn't respond as you want, and the firmware update is supposed to fix that. Now, one handy feature of these modern cameras is they have face tracking autofocus and object tracking autofocus. This one's no exception, that has it. If I press, it's in face mode, but I've no faces here. I'm the only one here, so there's no faces. But if that turns it off. Yeah, if I touch something on the screen, you'll see this SLR camera's in focus. But if I use my thumb to touch on the other camera, it tries to focus on that, and you can see the little green square to say it's focused on that. And if we move the camera around, the square moves to show you which bit it's focused on. So that works really well. And if I want to focus back on the SLR, if I press on the Canon logo, or near the Canon logo, it has actually just about managed it, and I'll see if I can do that when it's recording. It does it when it's recording, but it does overshoot, so you know it can't quite make its mind. If I go on the EOS logo there, it's done that nicely. If we go back to up there, again it's done it quite well. I think it overshooted a couple of times, but it did it reasonably well. But the problem is I have to have the camera in fully automatic mode, which is what that A is up there, in order to do that. And I often don't use the camera in fully automatic mode. I often use it in manual mode. You see we've got auto tracking white balance here, we've got automatic gain control, auto shutter, auto iris, if I it needs to be an autofocus, doesn't it? It's basically fully automatic, it won't let you do anything. Normally I have the camera in manual mode, and I set the shutter speed, I set the gain, and I often set the aperture all manually. In fact, I often set the white balance manually as well, but I may still want autofocus, like face tracking. So I might not want the exposure to change, I might not want the white balance to change, because I know I'm setting those. But if I'm following a person along a street or across a field or something, as I will be doing later on today, I may well want the face tracking autofocus, and I can't use face tracking. If I press the button to bring that up, it says invalid, and I can't touch on the screen. Oh, in the manual mode, if I change it to autofocus, you get the regular autofocus mode, so it's focused on the SLR, but I can't now touch the screen to make it focus on something else. The only way I can focus on the other camera is to override it with the knob and probably get it wrong. So I'm hoping the update will help this. So thank you to YouTube user Chris Child for actually notifying me of this firmware update. I didn't know they'd done one otherwise. So I've got the memory card all set up with the firmware update. Just download it and extract it onto a card and go menu, others. If we go on version, you see we've got 1.3, we're updating to 1.4, so on update. Yeah, version 1.3 to 1.4 that says. And that should update it. There we go, update is completed, version 1.4. So first thing to notice, I am actually in manual mode, and you can see the face bit is there. If I push the face tracking button, it turns it on and off, and if I push on the screen, we get the little box appear to say that it's focusing on something, and we can tell it to focus on anything that we like, so that obviously works. Right, so here's the new options. We've got focus ring drive in the menu. It's on linear now. If we change it to non-linear, that's basically how it was before. So I've got it at the extreme, 0.1 meters there. So that'll focus really close up. But if I just turn this really slowly, I have to keep going and 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 keep going all the way around there until the Canon EOS camera actually comes into focus. I'm going to change it to linear. Camera switch mode, focus ring drive linear. And this actually behaves a lot more like this one here on this broadcast lens. So we're at the extreme there. I can just slowly bring that into focus now like that. And if we zoom in a bit, I can just change the focus between the different objects, and that feels a lot more natural than it did before. But we can go even further than that. As well as the focus ring drive, we've got a focus ring setting. It says 90 degrees. That basically shows the amount of turn that you have to do. This broadcast lens will go from about there to about there. Now you obviously can't see that, but that's a bit less than half a turn. If I have that set to 90, I can go from 0.1 down into about infinity and back again. You see that's sort of less than a quarter of a turn for the whole zoom range. I can now change that to however I want. I go down and change that to 360. It'll move a lot slower. I basically have to, that's the extreme, I basically have to turn the knob all the way around. That's halfway, that's focused on the Canon. That's about another turn and we're at infinity. So I have to turn the knob the entire way round to get the whole zoom range. Now I'm not going to use it on that but it's good to be able to adjust it, and that's one of the actual advantages of these electronic controls, is that you can set them to respond however you damn well please, and that's something they completely overlooked in this camera when they released it, because it just didn't work very well. However, it looks like it now does, so I'm very glad they've introduced this firmware update. I'm going to take the camera out with me later on to test it.